Good afternoon, students. How are you this afternoon? Oh, great. Ainsworth said great. Okay, in today's lesson, we will be speaking about and learning about salinization of agricultural soils. Our learning outcomes will be, we'll be able to analyze the negative effects of salinization on agricultural soils. We will show how salinization of aquifers has a negative effect on agricultural soils. We will also discuss consequences of global warming on soil moisture and content. We will point out that adaptation measures can increase resilience and the capacity for communities to adapt to changes in local climate conditions. Now, students, have you heard the term aquifer before?
Yes.
Okay. By a show of hands, kindly raise your hands, please. Thank you. Now, before we continue, I place a strip of paper in front of you. That will be your talking chip today. That will give you permission to speak or rights to speak. So whenever I ask a very important question, and if I say the orange strips, only those students with the orange strip will give responses. Do you understand? Okay, so just now I pose a question. Have you heard the term aquifer before? And most of you raise your hand. Okay, let me call on the pink group, those who have the pink strips. Go ahead, Yadira.
An aquifer is an underground stream.
Okay, Yadira said it's an underground stream. Thank you, Yadira. Those with the pink slips, please raise them up. Thank you. Go ahead, young man.
It's any source of water that is underground.
It's a source of water that is underground. Very good. Okay, based on research, students, it says an aquifer is a body of saturated rocks. It's a body of saturated rocks through which water can move very easily. Your responses were that it's an underground stream, it's a source of water underground, and it's a body of saturated rocks through which water flows easily. Aquifers can become contaminated by a variety of different substances found in the environment. In your opinion, what are some of these substances that can contaminate an aquifer? Put on your thinking cap. Those with the blue strips. Edwin?
Aquifers can become contaminated by different forms, such as some places or some communities won't have a sewer system, so they would have to dig their own septic. That could intrude with the underwater system and pollute it. Also, wells. Some wells aren't done very proper. They wouldn't cover up around the well. They would just leave it open where any dirt can, whenever it rains, dirt can go into it. And I guess during floods, if a well is again covered up with water, dirty water, it can dirty underground
Excellent,
water.
Edwin. These are accurate sewage systems that will lead to runoff into an aquifer. Also, wells that are not constructed properly, and as well as floods. Another person? Yes, Stephen?
Drains.
Drains. Runoff from drains. And we're talking about substances that contaminate aquifers, underground streams. Okay, based on research, I found that dust is one substance, sulfur dioxide, we have lead, we have minerals as well, we have pesticides that some of the farmers use, we also have toxic chemicals, carbon dioxide, we have methane, that is the result of combustion and decaying matter. We also have mining, industrial farming, and the list goes on, students. So we know that aquifers can be contaminated or polluted by a wide variety of factors that are in our environment. And here I just have a brief synopsis of it. It has stain repellents. It also has perfluorinated compounds, grease that is given off by oils. We have dust, volcanic gases, natural gases in the air, such as carbon dioxide, oxygen, and nitrogen. Industrial farming, though I mentioned that here, mining and forestry activities. Okay, based on this diagram here is showing you a brief diagram of the water table. It says groundwater is basically water located or found in the ground. The top surface of the groundwater layer is called the water table. Here is a simplified diagram showing how the groundwater is saturated below the water table, and that is the purple area. The groundwater above the water table in the pink area may be wet to a certain degree, but it does not stay saturated. The dirt and rock in this unsaturated zone contain air and some water and support the vegetation on the earth. The saturated zone below the water table has water that fills the tiny spaces between rock particles and the cracks or fractures of the rocks. Water that drains through the soil profile and reaches the water table is called recharge, whereas we have water that drains from the water table and runs off is called discharge. Now, groundwater serves many purposes, but before we go there, before we go to that slide there, what is the importance of groundwater? Think about the question very carefully. What is the importance of groundwater? Think about it carefully before I call. And remember, we are using our talking strips. What is the importance of groundwater? Those with the orange slits. Go ahead. Ainsworth? One importance of groundwater.
Plants use it they use the water.
For plant growth. Very good, Ainsworth. Daisy?
For drinking.
For drinking through wells, drinking purposes. There are many communities that have dug out wells. Krista?
For life on earth.
For life on earth. Thank you, Krista. Could be for both flora and fauna. Okay? Based on research, students, we found that fresh groundwater was used for many important purposes, with the largest amount going toward irrigating crops or irrigations, such as the delicious eggplants, squash, and rutabagas that children love to have for dinner. Local city and county water departments withdraw a lot of groundwater for public uses, such as for delivery to homes, businesses, and industries, as well as for community uses such as firefighting. I know in Belize City, the fire department has installed a lot of water pumps underground, and there are certain concrete objects that they build in front of the areas to indicate to pedestrians that this is a fire hydrant. And the fire hydrant has been installed in that particular area. In the event that there is a fire, they can get or extract water from that underground channel. Okay, so they install fire hydrants. So we know that fresh groundwater has been used for irrigation, for communities, industries, businesses, for homes, and for outing fires, as well as for swimming pools and mining facilities as well. Now, what is salinization? It's a very big term, but I know you have been hearing about salinization before. What does it mean whenever you hear the word salinization? Think about the first part of the word, salinize. Or even think about the trip that we went on when Dr. Leslie spoke about the mangrove trees. What does salinization mean? Blue strips? Edwin?
I think salinization means when fresh water or groundwater gets contaminated with salt water, making it very making the fresh water salty and not good enough for plants to use and for people to drink anymore.
Excellent, Edwin. It says salinization is the process, Yadira, by which water-soluble salts accumulate in the soil. There is a high salt intake or salt content. Salinization may occur naturally or because of conditions resulting from management practices. Soil salinity is basically the salt content in the soil. How much is it? And it says soil salinity is simultaneously referred to as the white plague or the salt bomb. There are many countries that are now being affected by the white plague, such as Australia. Many of their plants are dying, and based on observation and investigation, you will see hard white soluble salts attaching themselves and building up on plants, and the plants are now dying. What causes salinization? It says salinization on the soil surface occur where the following conditions occur together. And the first one is the presence of soluble salts, such as sulfates or sodium. You also have a high water table. And what would contribute to a high water table, students? Think about factors that would contribute to a high water table. Blue strip, Kyle? What will contribute to a high water table? Remember, we know that the water table is under the ground. But what would make the water rise to the top of the surface?
I would say the lack of trees can cause a high water table.
Lack of vegetation. Very good, Kyle. Go ahead, Edwin.
Low infiltration rate could cause a high water table because too much water is being held back because the infiltration rate isn't high enough.
Excellent point you brought up. We spoke about the infiltration rate. And what factors will affect infiltration rate? We spoke about a particular process that will affect the content and texture of soil moisture. Begins with letter E. We have too much of this particular process, it makes our soils become more degraded and lose its richness. Edwin?
Erosion.
Excellent. Okay, and then we also have other factors such as the high rate of evaporation. We have low annual rainfall. Human activities such as the use of potassium, which can form sylvite, a naturally occurring salt. Okay, so another cause of salinization is human activities such as the use of potassium, which can form sylvite, a naturally occurring salt. Where does the salt come from? We have been hearing about salt intake and salinization. Where does the salt come from, students? Let's go to the orange strips. Daisy?
It comes from the sea.
Sea, thank you, Daisy. Okay, we have several major sources of salt, and these include the first one, rain. It says salts can be carried from the seas by strong winds and fall as rain across inland areas. We also have from retreating seas that are eroding and becoming dead because they have seas that could die. There is no life in some seas due to different climatic changes and global warming effects. We also have rocks. Rocks contain salts which are released during the process or weathering process. Many types of rocks, including marine sediments. Remember when we spoke about calcium carbonate? Granites and rhyolites contain high levels of sodium and potassium. We have groundwater. Groundwater provides a source of salts for saline-affected areas. And we also have human activities such as land clearing, and we have aquaculture. Climatic trends that favor accumulation as well. The more rain we have and the more rain that becomes absorbed in the groundwater levels, and whenever water is recharged back to the earth's surface, salt can be released. The type of precipitation as well. Now here we have a diagram that shows some of the processes involved in the discharge of salt. Precipitation. What do you know about precipitation, students? I know you have learned about the water cycle before. What do you know about precipitation? Edwin?
Are the different forms of which water vapor that is condensed. It falls down to earth. Different forms of precipitation could be rain, sleet, hail, or snow.
Excellent, Edwin. So in precipitation, we have the formation of any solid or liquid that condenses and forms back to the earth. As those precipitation falls to the earth's surface, we also have a process that is called evapotranspiration. Now, what do you think that process means? Evapotranspiration. Evapo, what does that mean there? Yes?
I think it means it evaporates from the plant.
Very good, Edwin. You're perfectly right. So water that is given off from the plants or vegetation is evaporated back into the atmosphere. We also have another process there, infiltration. What does it mean to infiltrate? Daisy.
When the water is soaked into the soil.
Very good, Daisy. So the water is absorbed, or I would say the earth's surface becomes saturated with the water content. Because in the earth's surface you have water, you have rocks, sand, gravel, and you also have air spaces. And those air sacs or air spaces allow the water to pass through. And then in that third diagram we have runoff. Some water that is observed in the earth's surface, some water run off to different areas, and some goes into the water, the underground channels. Now, any process that affects the soil-water balance may affect the movement and accumulation of salts in the soil. There are several processes that are involved, and we just spoke about a few of them briefly. These include hydrology, which is closely linked with the water cycle. We have our climate, and we know that our climate is changing drastically. We have irrigation. What do you know about irrigation? Go ahead, Edwin.
Irrigation is the disbursement of water to the different plants.
There are some farmers who have installed canals with pipes, and so every so often or repeatedly, water is allowed to flow through irrigation canals. Thank you, Edwin. We also have drainage, plant cover and rooting characteristics, and farming practices which can also affect the soil quality. Now, types of soil salinity. We know that our soils are becoming more saltier. There are two types of soil salinity, and these are irrigated land salinity and dry land salinity. Dry land salinity is the movement of salt to the land surface with groundwater, occurring on land that is not used for irrigation. And we also have irrigation salinity, refers to an accumulation of salt in the plant root zone or on the soil surface as a result of irrigation practices. So dryland salinity is just simply whenever it rains and the soil can become saltier due to the different precipitation that flows on the earth's surface, and you have irrigation salinity, which is I would say a result of farming practices. Saline salts usually contain stable salt, gypsum, magnesium, sulfate, potassium chloride, and sodium sulfate. Now, why is soil quality very important, students? Why do we need to protect our soil or conserve the texture and moisture of our soil? Yes, Edwin?
So we can continue having healthy crops?
Excellent, very good. We need to have healthy vegetation. And our crop yield will also increase if we have healthier soils. Another person, why do we need to have good soil quality? Edwin?
To prevent the erosion of our land, because if the soil is dry, it becomes easier to erode. So whenever there is a strong wind, it could blow away all our topsoil, which we need.
Very good, Edwin. Okay, so it says soils have important direct and indirect impacts on agricultural productivity. The richer our soil, the more crop produce or products we can have, students. Water quality will also be at its best. And global climate. Microorganisms in soils, like the earthworms, transfer nutrients into forms that can be used by growing plants. Soils are the storehouses for water and nutrients. Remember, whenever it rains, the water flows to the earth's surface. Where does all that water go? Some waters run off into the rivers, streams, lakes. Some stays in the underground water channels. So it's a storehouse. Soils also help to create a balance with the water table and the environment. Now, threats to soil quality. It says soil quality is at risk from a number of threats driven by a range of man-made and natural pressures, including climate change. We spoke about the 20 deadliest effects of global warming, and one of those deadliest effects was desertification, where we have dry lands developing all over in different countries and the land losing its nutrients. Now the land is losing its nutrients, and we also have the buildup of salt, which is another adverse effect. And if we have a high content of salt, then we will have a low yield production of crops. Most of our trees and crops and vegetation, including shrubs, will eventually die with the salt built up. Now, human activities have changed the character and quality of our soils over time. And we just spoke about the importance of our soil. It says we have destroyed protective vegetative cover and have kept soil bare for long periods of time. We also actively add nutrients and pesticides to soils and cover them with housing and infrastructure. There are some farmers that use very toxic chemicals and pesticides, some for killing harmful insects, but some because they want to have maybe reap 2 sets of crop for a particular year. And what those pesticides are doing is actually harming the soil. It's degrading the earth's surface. Once soil is damaged or contaminated, it can be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to restore. In some cases, soils can themselves become sources of pollutants. These pollutants can make their way into water sources, affecting water quality. Good soil management is therefore essential to maintain and improve water quality. And there are a variety of threats to soil quality. The first one is climate change, and we have been hearing a lot about climate change. With the increase of the effects of climate change, students, we will have greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide. More carbon dioxide will be produced due to different aerosol sprays and chemicals that we're using. We will also have methane from livestock and livestock manures. We'll have nitrous oxide, mainly from the use of nitrogen fertilizers. We will have a number of soil processes which will be accelerated by increasing temperatures and rainfall intensity. Higher temperatures will increase mineralization of organic matter and result in increased carbon dioxide in the environment. Climate change is an overarching driver affecting numerous soil quality issues such as a loss of organic matter. When we have the adverse effect of climate change, these are some of the effects, students. We will have erosion, reduced trafficability as a result of periods of increased soil wetness. We will have a reduction in soil fertility as a result of the salt intake. We will have increase and changing pest loads. We will have a change of vegetative type. Whenever there is a high salt intake on the earth's surface, you will observe the visible presence of different types of vegetation. Trees that are considered more salt tolerant, and the trees that cannot excrete the salt from within their phylum or their xylem, those types of trees will die. We also have sealing. This is another threat to soil quality. This is where people cover large areas or surfaces of land where vegetation grows, and they cover it with cement. Okay? It says sealing is a permanent covering of soil with hard surfaces such as roads and buildings. Compaction is another threat to soil quality, and this is a process by which soil particles are forced closer together due to reducing soil porosity, meaning that the water will not be able to flow through the pores of the soil. This is caused by heavy machinery traffic and to a lesser extent by animals trampling on the wet soils, Edwin. The impact this can have are the number and size of pores within soil is reduced. You have a reduction in the capacity of water that soil can hold, and that can also lead to erosion. We will have formation of cemented layers, a reduction of root growth and therefore plant development, and a loss of biodiversity as well, an increase in runoff and flooding. We will also have landslides, and we spoke about landslides previously. What can you share about landslides? What is a landslide? Irma, what can you share with us concerning a landslide? We spoke of what is a landslide, the different types of landslides, the effects of landslides. Kyle, would you like to assist Irma?
Landslide is almost like erosion. It is when large chunks of rock or soil breaks away downhill.
Very good, Kyle. Mass movements of rocks or debris flowing down a slope. Okay, so and we know the different types of landslides are very dangerous and deadly. We have organic matter decline. Organic matter decline is the loss of organic material from soils and is caused by intensive farming, such as the slash and burn system. Whenever the crop is produced, they extract the crops and they burn that particular land. That area, that earth surface there has now become depleted of its nutrients. A potential for diversity loss, as most soil organisms require organic matter for food. A reduction in soil quality for most land uses, particularly agriculture. Carbon loss to the atmosphere whenever burning of fossil fuels or the trees are involved. There is carbon being emitted into the air. We also have, whenever the carbon is emitted into the air, this will accelerate climatic warming. We have a potential for increased water pollution as many pollutants such as heavy metals and pesticides are bound to organic matter. We spoke about erosion. Erosion is a naturally occurring process in which soil particles become detached by wind or water. And just to mention two of the adverse effects, we would have loss of carbon stored in the soil, and we would even have increased flood risk. Atmospheric deposition. This is the burning of fossil fuels by industry. Households and vehicle releases gaseous emissions of sulfur dioxide and oxides of nitrogen that can travel hundreds of miles in the atmosphere. These gases can be dissolved in rainwater to form sulfuric and nitric acids, and we know that this will fall back as precipitate to the earth. It will result in structural damage to soil minerals and also reduce drainage water quality due to increased leakage of acidic compounds and toxic elements. Waste to land contamination. This is another threat to soil quality, students. It has the application of waste products to land, such as farmyard, manure, seaweed sludge, and organic materials from industrial processes can have many agricultural and environmental benefits if they are well managed. There are many people in the rural areas who are using bagasse and manure and even human waste as a form of fuel, but it has to be managed properly. If it's not managed properly, and then we will have an accumulation of toxic components of waste in the soil, and this can affect our soil quality. A risk of soil biodiversity decline, unhealthy plant growth caused by unbalanced nutrient supply. We will have the potential for water eutrophication through nutrient transfer from the soil. And we will also have the potential for increased production of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. It will also change the soil biodiversity. I will only capture this part to the bottom here, students. Whenever there is an increase in soil salinity, it will change the soil attributes. And so there will be a loss in nutrient status, organic and carbon content, maximum root depth will be affected, how far the roots are embedded in the soil, the texture will decline, available water holding capacity will also decline, and the pH balance will decline of the soil. Indicators of salinity. Now these indicators will give us an idea of how we will be able to recognize whenever a particular area has become saline. It has, as salinity affects a landscape, warning signs appear. These include sick or dying trees, declining vegetation. You have a white crusting on the surface. You start to see a lot of little like white pebbles, white crust, and they're actual salts that have risen up from the water ground channel. The growth of salt-tolerant trees, irregular patterns of crop growth and lack of plant vigor, like the plants won't look as though they have any life. You will also see the colonization of salt-tolerant weed-like plants such as sea barley grass and spiny rush, salty bare patches, and saline pool in creek beds. You will have a loss of biodiversity, which will also escalate because the plants and the animals will not be able to consume or utilize the water because it has become saline, has become salty. You will also have an extinction of some aquatic biota. Now, adaptation measures. We know that climate change is contributing to a high salt intake or soil salinity. What can we do to prevent that? Based on research, students, I found out that planting perennial deep-rooted crops, and perennial crops are trees that can grow more than 2 years. They have a long life. Better management of annual crops and pastures. Installing systems that drain excess surface and subsurface water and pump out groundwater. Planting salt-tolerant crops and grasses that can utilize the salt that is in the earth's surface. You have developing new industries that use the saline resources, saline aquaculture, and harvesting salt on a commercial basis. Now the impacts are very deadly. It has, the effects of salinity are broad, and it includes reduced productivity, capacity of affected land. The land will not be able to yield or produce much. We will have degradation of the environment and wildlife habitats. Eventually, our flora and our fauna will die out and become extinct. We will have reduction in number of plants and animals due to saline soils and water. We will have deterioration of water quality, which limits the use of water for stock and domestic water supplies and increases the water treatment. We will have loss of production, causing social, psychological, and economic hardship. We will have damage to our roads, damage to other infrastructure. After a while, the salt will make different infrastructure corrodes. We will have damage to our channels and our underground pipes. We will also have damage to water-using equipment and machinery. What can we do? It says, since salinity is a problem that affects us all, we all have a part to play in coping with it. The most effective method of dealing with salinity are likely to be a combination of different methods. And one of them is the development of commercial tree production system, reforestation, farming system that combines the best current annual and perennial plants. We have to look at new types of shrubs and vegetation and start planting those, such as cereal, pulses, oil seeds, and forage. We need to start looking at new tools to help land managers monitor leakage past the root zone and change their land use. We have to look at engineering solutions, such as deep open drains that will help to I would say, hold some of the water, siphons, windmills, and solar pumping in areas that are saline to extract the salt. We will look at grow salt-tolerant crops. We will reduce the tillage, which might upset salt from deeper soil horizon within the earth. Many farmers practice tillage of a farming technique, but they do not know as they dig the earth, as they dug deeper into the earth, they're bringing up more salt. Okay? So the farmers have to examine the different type of farming practices that they are also utilizing. We can return manure and crop residue to the soil to increase water retention. We can also irrigate to maintain salts at a level below the root zone in the soil. Okay, so I know you learned about salinization of water or aquifers, and we shared information about salinization of the soil. Now, before we bring our lesson to a closure, I would like you to share at least one thing that you learned about salinity of soil. We spoke about the causes, the threats to soil quality, and there were a number of them. We spoke about the effects and some mitigation measures that we can employ. Yes, Anna?
Salinity destroys our trees.
Very good. Salinity destroys our trees. Erwin?
I learned that if the ground is salty, the plant quality, the crop quality will not be so good.
Very good. It will decline. Thank you very much. Steven?
I learned how to prevent a dramatic thing like that. We can plant like salt
Tolerant trees to obtain or to take in some of the salt. Very good, Steven. Irma, would you like to share something?
I learned where the salt come from.
And where does the salt come from, Irma?
Groundwater.
Groundwater, very good.
And rocks.
Rocks, because I mentioned that rocks contains a lot of salts and minerals. Thank you, Irma. Another person? Edwin?
I learned that different ways to help prevent or to help reduce the salinity of the water is to plant trees or plants that are resistant to salt water, and also use the salt water, thus causing or using up more salt water in there and making it less dense.
Thank you, Edwin. And as you were speaking, Edwin, I thought about a movie that I saw where salt was extracted from the sea. And historical data showed that even some of our ancestors, the Maya, including the Maya, they used to extract salt from the sea. Now, we would want new industries to be formed where whenever they can come in and take the salt that is given off from the groundwater channels and use those salt maybe to make different products. Salts are used to make a lot of different products, including soaps. Okay, so we would want new industries to be developed and formed in our country as well. Another person, what did you learn about soil salinity? One more person. We shared a lot today. Thank you, Yadira.
The effects of soil salinity are really deadly.
And why would you say that the effects are deadly?
Because they can kill the plants which provide us with oxygen.
Very good, Yadira. Thank you, students.